Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Justin Fields isn't going to start against the Los Angeles Rams in week 1, but I have a good feeling that we might just see Matt Nagy put his rookie quarterback out there at least a little bit. This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm an analyst for Pro Football Focus, and I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook, join the Locked On Bears Facebook group, and make sure that you subscribe to the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. On the show today, we explore this idea of a potential Justin Fields package, what it might look like, some of the advantages and potential disadvantages for the Bears and the Bears offense. We will hear from Los Angeles Rams head coach Sean McVay about how his team preparing for both quarterbacks just in case, even though they know Dalton is going to be the starter. He'll sort of explain some of his logic behind that, and we'll look at how that is an advantage for the Bears. And we'll wrap up with a comparison because the San Francisco 49ers are thinking about something similar with like a Trey Lance package for them. So we'll kind of compare and contrast and look at what the 49ers are going to do and how the Bears might be able to apply some of that to the Justin Fields situation. I think it's important to sort of get a more complete sense of why this quarterback package could be a possibility. I think Matt Nagy was asked about it at one point during, the preseason, and he wasn't asked super directly about it, and so he didn't really give a direct answer, and I wasn't able to go back and find exactly where he was asked, but he kind of gave a smile and said, I don't know, we'll see what happens there. And so there's sort of this hint that one could be coming at some point, whether that's week 1 against the Rams or, week 3 against the Browns or later on in the season, depending on how things go with Andy Dalton. We'll see along the way, but you can see where you might be able to find some advantage there, right? You put in Justin Fields for a specific kind of package, and maybe he provides a spark. It gives Justin Fields some potential value to just be on the field in a regular season game, even if it's just in a limited capacity. Because, of course, we know he's sort of preparing each week as though he's supposed to be like the starter. That's what they say. Every player is supposed to prepare like they're going to be starting, and he's getting some experience from going through that process. But even just from preseason to regular season action in terms of the quality of opponent you're facing and the speed of the situation and the gravity of the situation, where it really all the plays matter that much more in the regular season. Where in the preseason, you throw an incomplete pass or you get sacked or whatever might happen, not a big deal. Outcome of the game doesn't matter. Jobs aren't at stake, et cetera, et cetera. Regular season has a little bit more weight to it. I mean, obviously. And Justin Fields has played in some very big moments in college football, so it's not about the moment being too big for him. It's just feeling it in the NFL context and what that means when, everyone's on all the guys are paid contracts and can become free agents as opposed to, college players who have class, right? There's different dynamics, and the players, your teammates, are at different stages of their life, and there's a lot that's very different about playing in the NFL regular season than the college regular season, just even intangibly and sort of off the field. And so you can see where maybe if you just say, you know what, Justin, we don't need you to come out on the field and run the full Bears playbook. We're going to practice 5-6 plays for you this week. That's your Justin Fields package. Master those. He can come out, rip that play call off, get the protections mastered because he knows these are his few plays as opposed to the 100 plus or whatever is going to be in his playbook. You can see the other side of the coin here. The cliche is if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none, right? And there's not really a track record of strong success for teams that try and use more than one quarterback in a game at a time. Typically, it's because one of them isn't, or neither one is good enough to really hold down the spot full time and to keep the other one really on the bench. It's not quite the same when it's a rookie that you're bringing along. And so, I mean, you can see some of the logic there, but you don't want it to be harmful to Andy Dalton's rhythm, right? If you're going with Dalton as a starter, even though you might not want to, but if we're just saying that's one of our constraints here that we can't change, Andy Dalton is your starter, then what you have to do is put Dalton in the best position to be successful if that's not going to be able to change at this point. And so You don't want to take Dalton out and disrupt a rhythm that he might have been going through, or progress that he might have been getting, or a game flow that he might be going through. I mean, it's a really kind of tough line to walk along if you're going to try, if you want the spark from Fields, but you don't want to totally throw off Dalton. I mean, you wonder if, if Dalton is maybe not struggling, but say you need a spark for some reason. The offense, Dalton hasn't thrown interceptions, but they've gone 3 and out and had a couple of completions, but just haven't had the big play. And say Justin Fields comes in and, I don't know, it's a read option or a handoff and it breaks a big play. Does that take away from Dalton's confidence that, oh, well, Fields can come in and make this big play, but I can't? Or does he start thinking, well, everyone can see that Fields made that big play and I wasn't making that big play? You start to have some of those concerns. Or, if Fields can come in and have a big spark, then why not just put Justin Fields in full time then? If he's good enough to potentially play one of these packages, then isn't he good enough to just be the full-time starting quarterback, right? I mean, you can kind of see both ways, but I think given the way Matt Nagy has kind of talked about it, given the way it's then flown under the radar a little bit, and given the way that the Los Angeles Rams are apparently looking forward to trying to prepare for this, I just have this feeling that Matt Nagy will go into his bag of tricks a little bit, and somewhere, somehow, even if it's just one play against the Rams, maybe Justin Fields will take the field. And there'll be that moment where we're wondering, did he just bench Andy Dalton? But then Andy Dalton will come back out, and unless Dalton struggles horribly. And I think that would be the most Justin Fields will see, is maybe a play here or a package here. But I do think just that potential threat on its own provides some slight advantage, at least, for the Chicago Bears. Now that a team like the Los Angeles Rams and future opponents have to at least keep the possibility open in their mind. We will hear from Los Angeles Rams head coach Sean McVay on his approach defensively next on Locked On Bears. Football season is back, and it's time to make the most of it with a better way to create your own custom football pools at RunYourPool.com, the premier sports pool hosting service. RunYourPool is ridiculously easy to use. You can run a football pool with your friends, your families, or your coworkers. You don't have to worry about, going around the office and collecting money from everybody. And there's always some communication and coordination. If somebody's out of the office, and it becomes hard to kind of narrow things down and get everybody all set up. But RunYourPool.com offers a bunch of different formats. You can do Survivor, Pick'em, Squares, Margins, Confidence Pool, 33, and more. And it's all online. It's all web-based. So they'll take care of it for you. Everyone can just go do it sort of on their own. You create it, and then they really take care of the rest from the structure. They've got formats for the NFL, for college football. You can do 1-week pools, full season, playoffs, or of course, the Super Bowl. And unlike other fantasy sports platforms, Run Your Pool has options and settings to really kind of make it your own. You're not just stuck in exactly their structure. So you can reconnect with your friends and join nearly 2 million football fans to make every game action-packed this season. Check them out today and get $10 off at runyourpool.com/lockedon, or use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. Anywhere, everywhere in the world, Run Your Pool helps friends and colleagues compete. The NFL season starts this week, so start today at runyourpool.com/lockedon and have your pool up and running in minutes. Again, runyourpool.com/lockedon. That time of year to get your sports bets in ahead of the week 1 action as well. And our friends at BetOnline.ag are going to be your number one place for all the pro and college football action this season. You can get all the updated odds, props, and contests, including some big ones. They've got online's biggest $500,000 NFL mega contest and the world's largest NFL Survivor contest, $200,000, open now at betonline.ag. Plus, you got to check out their opening day super promo, specifically for the Thursday, September 9th season opener between the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. If you place a bet on that game and you lose that bet, you're wrong. BetOnline.ag will refund your wager up to $25. It's a free bet. All you have to do is sign up, enter their promo code NFL100. Best of all, that NFL 100 promo code will also give you a 100% welcome bonus matching your first deposit to give you double the money to play with at betonline.ag, your online sportsbook experts. I was a little bit surprised to hear Los Angeles Rams coach Sean McVay sort of volunteer the possibility of seeing Justin Fields, because I think that's something that has flown under the radar a bit in Bears media. We've been so focused on who's going to be the starter, and I think we sort of forget that it's not black and white, that there is that package idea that Fields could come on the field at some point briefly in the game as part of a structured offensive piece. And I think part of it is that we don't think of that as, sustainable, highly successful football strategy. I mean, it can work in brief moments, but, and like the Saints have done it well with, I guess, Taysom Hill is sort of like a 2 QB thing, but he also plays wide receiver and tight end and special teams. So they made it work better with Breeze than I think any of us would have imagined in New Orleans. So maybe there's something to this, but Fields is not going to play wide receiver. And I'm assuming you're not going to have Fields and Dalton on the field at the same time. Justin is a little bit too valuable to potentially risk him out there like that. And it maybe gets a little gimmicky at that point. But McVay and the Rams more so looking at specifically like a set of situations where Andy Dalton comes off of the field, Justin Fields goes on the field, and instead you end up, having to, your defense is kind of scrambling, going, okay, well, wait, what are they going to do with this guy? And, what kind of plays are that going to look like? Because they don't have like specific film of what exactly Justin Fields is going to do. And that was sort of the basis of the question that Sean McVay was asked this week at Los Angeles Rams press conference. I think it was on Labor Day, just like, the question was something along the lines of like, is it almost easier to prepare for Andy Dalton because you have tape of him as opposed to Justin Fields because he would be, fresh out of college and trying to figure out how that might look. Here's how Sean McVay is approaching it for the Rams defense.
I think it'd be naive for us not to prepare for them to be able to utilize him in some form or fashion. But Andy's a winning quarterback in this league, does a great job. I really have seen a lot of film of Andy, even going back to when Jay Gruden was his coordinator at Cincinnati. So very familiar with what a really good quarterback he is. He does a great job, accurate anticipation, recognizes the looks defensively, can straighten up protection. So Andy Dalton's a really good quarterback, and it'll be a great challenge. And then you see the ways that Justin, made a lot of plays going back to his career at Ohio State, what he showed in the preseason. And so I think you got to be ready for either or, but it's going to be a challenge for sure.
So I think you can kind of sense there that level of respect that McVay has for Dalton. And it's the sort of thing that the opposing team always gives you, kind of even regardless of how you actually sort of feel about them. I mean, if we're being completely honest here, it doesn't always mean a lot when they're complimentary of literally every opponent they come across. You're never going to come out and say, oh, yeah, their quarterback sucks and we're going to throw him to the ground. I mean, no, they're always going to say very nice things about him. So I always take that a little bit with some grain of salt, but I think it also does speak to some of the logic why Matt Nagy is starting Andy Dalton. Not to say it's the best decision, but there is some logic behind it. You can see sort of both ways there. And, especially when you're going up against Aaron Donald, having some of that extra experience with protections and making calls at the line of scrimmage before the snap, there's some real value there. Again, I think Justin Fields could also do it. I think it's a stretch to say that Fields wouldn't be able to, call the right protections against Aaron Donald. Maybe there's a higher chance of missing one here or there and making some mistakes along the way. But I think it's also a stretch to say that Andy Dalton isn't going to make any mistakes in that regard, that he's going to be perfect in calling out all the protections in a new Bears offense in his first game. So, I think it's just, there's some value there. But even as a veteran, every quarterback, maybe not Peyton Manning, but every quarterback that's not Peyton Manning and Tom Brady will miss on protections every once in a while. And Dalton is definitely more so in that category. But I think, the Rams preparing to some extent for two Bears quarterbacks means then they have less time to prepare for either one individually, that they can't just focus all in on Andy Dalton. They might have to practice some things against a Justin Fields type quarterback and maybe sort of and figure out what they might run with Fields if he's in the game and try and prepare for those types of things. But the Bears haven't showed a lot of like special different stuff for Fields. It was very similar types of offense. It was Fields making a lot of things happen after the play broke down, but it wasn't like a completely different offense in the preseason when Fields was out there as opposed to Andy Dalton. So there's an element of surprise here that the Bears have the advantage that they could come out with Fields and run some new things from different packages or different play calls, and maybe the Rams won't be able to have been all that prepared for it. But I think the key thing is that even just the threat of having Justin Fields on the bench, on the roster as a possibility to come in this game is enough. Even if the Bears don't use Justin Fields at all this week, or maybe they wait a couple weeks, but the fact that the Rams have even had to think about it and prepare for it is some sort of advantage that you wouldn't have otherwise if you were only for sure going to run with one quarterback. But it's interesting because while the Bears have kind of hidden this and haven't really talked about it much, it seems like the San Francisco 49ers and Trey Lance have been a little bit less shy about the possibility. We'll kind of compare the Trey Lance situation and what we've seen from the 49ers and how that might apply to what the Bears might do with Justin Fields next on Locked On Bears. Tell me if this sounds familiar to you. You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching sports highlights on your phone, and then you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle. And it's a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before. So you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to ever buy another device again. And the best part is there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. I recently got a package in the mail from our friends at BuiltBar.com, my reorder of salted caramel protein bars of the world's best tasting protein bars. Because they're protein bars. They're loaded up with high protein, high fiber, low sugar, low calories, but they taste like candy bars because they're all covered in 100% real chocolate and they're soft, they're easy to chew. And so when I get the salted caramel Built bars covered in chocolate, salted caramel on the inside, it tastes like a Milky Way. But there's no guilt. There's no empty calories, none of that extra crap that you don't need. It makes you feel like garbage, even though it tastes really good. I get all the taste and none of the extras that I don't want. And there's tons of good flavors too. Salted caramel is one of my favorites, but I love the coconut, the cookies and cream, the strawberry, the raspberry, and so many others. You can buy the mixed flavors box and you get to try them all. The coconut almonds in there. I mean, I haven't had one that wasn't good, but you'll find your favorites with the mixed box for sure. I'm telling you, you just got to try it for yourself. Tasting really is believing with Built Bars. And so you got to head over to BuiltBar.com and enter our promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. 49ers haven't exactly outwardly said, we're going to have a Trey Lance package that we're going to run 5 plays a game and, detail their full plan. But it's a conversation that really has floated around San Francisco from the moment they drafted him. And as they've sort of chosen to stick with Jimmy Garoppolo and all that stuff, Garoppolo's been asked about a package. I mean, it's been at the very least highly speculated if it hasn't been straight up fully confirmed by the 49ers. But the difference being that when the 49ers used Trey Lance in the preseason, they mixed in some very different things with him than they did with Jimmy Garoppolo. And I wonder if that's not what we could expect, something slightly similar to with Justin Fields in Chicago. And maybe it's the right idea at the very least. If you're going to put Fields out there, Kyle Shanahan's one that is worth imitating in terms of play design at the very least. You can poke holes in other things about how Shanahan's run the 49ers, et cetera, but he knows how to structure an offense in ways that Bears fans have been critical of Matt Nagy for. So when you look at what Trey Lance did in the preseason, and I wish I could sort of have video visuals to go with it, but it's a lot of, first of all, read option, as you would expect, mobile, strong arm quarterback, the standard stuff that's already in the Bears playbook, option the defender. You don't block him. If he goes down on the running back, quarterback keeps it. If he waits for the quarterback, then you hand it off to the running back. And it allows you to leave one fewer defender blocked, so then you can go block one extra player elsewhere purely because of the threat of your quarterback run that I'm not sure Andy Dalton quite provides for this Bears offense. But there's some different variations on the read option that really require even more of a mobile quarterback that we saw Shanahan kind of come out with for the 49ers. The main one being there's different terms for what different coaches will call it, counter bash, kind of an inverted veer, but usually this is more, bash means more the blocking stays with the quarterback. So typically in a regular inverted veer, the blockers are blocking for the running back. And then if the quarterback keeps it, he's going on his own because, he's optioning the guy and everyone's following the running back, right? So no one's going to be immediately chasing after the quarterback until they read the quarterback, the quarterback has the ball and realize that the running back doesn't have it. And by then the quarterback gets some free yards. But when you run bash, what you're actually doing is you're pulling your offensive lineman to go with the quarterback, and the running back's kind of going on his own. And so then if the quarterback then keeps it, the defense still is expecting the running back to get it. But when the quarterback goes, he has a pulling blocker or two with him. So not only is the misdirection taking them towards the running back, but then when the quarterback's not alone either, and he's got extra blockers, and there's some potential there to mix that in with the read option. And so if the defense is keying on the running back, then they might look to the blockers. And so then if you switch the blockers to go with the quarterback, right, then they can't always just read the same thing to figure out where the ball is going to go or who their attention should be on. It really stresses them in a lot of ways to actually identify who has the ball quickly and respond and react to that, and really hold in their gaps as opposed to trying to guess who might get the ball. But then I think Kyle Shanahan does a good job of taking it a slightly step farther and then making play action off of those exact same reads. So not just like a run pass option, but true play action where, the same mesh point with the running back. And then when the quarterback keeps it and doesn't hand it off, you got receivers running routes. And maybe if you run the running plays a few times, and so the defense thinks, oh, the Trey Lance package, or in Chicago, the Justin Fields package is just read option running quarterback, right? So then they step up and get aggressive, play action over the top. You might have an easier potential completion there and really kind of set things up with that game flow over time. And then if you do have success passing, then they might be less aggressive against the run, and then you can have more success running until, you always sort of leave them in that conflict. And so I think it's the kind of thing that you don't have to do that all in the first game. If you're going to have a Justin Fields package, maybe Fields comes in against the Rams and does a read option here and inverted veer there. Maybe it's 3 plays and they're all runs. So then, week 2, week 3, those teams are preparing for the Fields package and say, well, Fields just comes in and does runs. Then in week 2, you throw in the play action, or week 3, you throw in the play action, right? And all of a sudden it's another thing that they hadn't been able to properly prepare for. And maybe if they get so focused on preparing for the run, they'll be even less ready for the surprise of the pass. So those are the types of ways where you can start to build out a strategy here that does make sense and might be worth, potentially disrupting the rest of the flow of your offense if you really need somebody to come in and bring that spark. But it's got to be situationally. It's got to make sense in the structure of the rest of your offense. Thinking like 3rd and short, you bring in Fields, and whether it's a play action pass or a read option, you have the potential to bring Dalton back in for 4th and 1 if you need to throw a slant or some curl, something quick. When you're in a 4-down situation like that maybe that's a time you can come in and get that 3rd down, that big 3rd down conversion, that big 3rd down spark, or maybe in the red zone when you really need points. And maybe that Justin Fields read option can just be the one misconfusion, right? The defense misreads it one time. And if you're in the red zone, that margin of error is so much smaller that if one guy's out of position there, it can be the difference between a touchdown and not. Whereas if you do it at the 50-yard line, maybe it's a 10-yard gain instead of, a 5-yard gain or whatever. But that extra difference in the red zone can be points. And points are king, of course. You need points. And so a Justin Fields red zone package would not surprise me. That's where Matt Nagy would go to the trick plays a lot back in 2018 when the Bears offense had a lot of that success. When you saw, Santa Slay and Willy Wonka, I can't remember all the different creative names they had for the, Mitch Trubisky package coming in and out, and Tariq Cohen did some wildcat quarterbacking there. And they even had both quarterbacks on the field. So I guess we can't rule that out for Andy Dalton either, but it does need to flow. It can't just be no rhyme or reason, random, all right, 1st and 10 at the 50-yard line, throw him in there, and then go Dalton, and then throw him in on 2nd and 6, right? It should make some kind of sense. If Dalton's completed 4 of his last 5 passes, you're not going to take him out and put Fields in just randomly while Dalton was maybe getting hot. But say, you run on 1st down and get a couple yards, you run on 2nd down, you get a couple yards, and it's 3rd and 3, put in Fields for 3rd down. Dalton hasn't really, hasn't been moving yet, but it's just something to spark this drive because you need to keep this drive alive, get a big play, and then Dalton can kind of pick back up from there and make things easier on everybody involved. So I think there's a real art to when you put him in there. It's not a science. It's not a only at this time and this time and this time. So, I don't think you want to do it right away in the first quarter while Dalton's still trying to kind of get into a rhythm there. And probably wouldn't want to do it on a 2-minute drive when you want to go no huddle and kind of keep things going. But you find your spots, and Matt Nagy always says it's like a feel thing, and you kind of have to trust your instinct and your gut. And certainly I think Nagy has lost some benefit of the doubt from Bears fans as far as game flow feel thing, but he hasn't had a quarterback like Justin Fields He hasn't had a situation like this to work with. So I think we at least deserve to give him the shot to see how this might work. And then we can evaluate for ourselves the results afterwards. You can be sure we'll break down anytime we see Justin Fields on the field right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure that you subscribe so you're keeping up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. We'll be getting you ready for week 1 and regular season football all throughout the rest of the week here. We'll catch up with Sosa Kremenijas from Locked On Rams for our crossover podcast on Thursday. We'll put together a Bears game plan for how to get Andy Dalton and the rest of this offense a victory over Aaron Donald. It'll be tough. We'll try and piece together a game plan for how we can put that together and so much more. So I hope you'll keep following along. Appreciate all the feedback we get on Twitter and in the YouTube comments and the emails at lockedonbears@gmail.com. I mean, it's great to hear from all the listeners of this show that really have reached out and been thankful for us and being a part of the conversation with us. Really, I do it for you guys, and I love having the back and forth as well. So appreciate it, and I hope in return, more than anything else, the Locked On Bears podcast has made it just a little bit easier for you to bear down.